All right, Lauren, thanks so much for being on the Friends with Wheels podcast. I appreciate it. Just to start things off, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you started in the work that you do today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. So, I'm Lauren. I'm a speech language pathologist, and I've been working in the pediatric world for my whole career, and really a special interest in social communication and noticing sort of a lot of gaps in the resources available to support clients, kids, teens, adolescents with conversation-based social skills. And so, from sort of that gap, I started to develop tools and strategies of my own to support these clients, which then turned into me developing a conversation-based tool. It's a card-based tool to support this particular goal area.
hmm So tell me a little bit about the work that you do as an SLP.
Sure. So I work in a multidisciplinary practice, and I work with a variety of clients across the age spectrum from sort of 18 months all the way up until teenagehood. And really, my special passion within all of that, and I work in a variety of different areas, is the social communication piece. So what I love to do is understand sort of the social challenges my clients may be facing, the areas that they want to work on in that social world that they're navigating, understand sort of what the needs are, where they're motivated to kind of make things easier or make different tweaks, and then help them identify those goal areas and target those things.
hmm For those who don't know, what is social communication?
Yeah, good question. So social communication is a lot of different things. It's being able to use language and communication for a social purpose. So, building connection with peers, initiating social interactions, keeping a social interaction going. So it's really far beyond just having language, but actually using it to drive relationships and connections, and an understanding of the social world.
hmm And what problems might someone with a speech issue or someone who has speech language difficulty have with social communication?
Yeah, good question. So, what we sometimes see is that kids or clients who have difficulty with language as a starting point may ultimately sort of have difficulty then once they catch up with their language or they acquire more language, using that language for sort of a higher social purpose. So they might be able to, use sentences well and be able to ask questions and make comments, but not necessarily directed to a variety of different communication partners. So there's a variety of different areas where sort of some of those social barriers might come up. And that's the exciting part, is that, different clients have different needs related to the social communication. So some might need sort of support with starting out those conversations and knowing sort of some of the language around those initial starting greetings. Some of the clients might have that, but need support to kind of keep the conversation going, which might look like, building their ability to ask different kinds of questions, make different kinds of comments, and then, closing out the interaction at the end of that conversation. And then within that, all of the barriers that might come up. So, they might know how to kind of end a conversation if they themselves are not interested, but they might not be able to identify when their communication partner isn't interested. And so we might get some sort of needs around how do we identify those signs of disinterest, and then what do we do with that to kind of move the conversation either to an endpoint or to a different topic.
hmm And so how do you as an SLP help clients with speech issues navigate, social communication? What modalities do you use to do that?
Yeah, good question. So I find visuals are really, really helpful in helping clients kind of understand where they're at in the interaction and where they need to go. So the conversation picture cards that I developed is based on a visual analogy that conversation is like a game of catch. And I use that very often in my practice. And so there's this idea that, when we start an interaction or we ask a client a question, we're going to throw the ball, hypothetically, hypothetically. When they ask us a question, they're going to throw it to us. We're going to hold on to it. We're going to respond. We're going to comment. There's moments where we want to set that ball down and add in pause. There's moments where, we're going to wind up, where we're going to kind of ease into an interaction versus kind of a hard toss. So there's all these different visuals that I've built into the conversation picture cards. And I find that using those visuals is very, very impactful for teaching all of the steps and stages of a conversation. And also role playing. So, once the client can understand the different steps of the conversation, really kind of getting into some practice one-on-one, back and forth, role playing some different specific skills and areas that they can then work on kind of outside of my therapy session as well.
Mm-hmm. To switch gears, I also saw you on a podcast episode. So what was that like?
Yeah, good question. So I did a podcast not too long ago. It was my first podcast, so my cameo, and it was great. It was, it's for me when it's an area that I'm passionate about talking about. I'm very, very comfortable. I love talking about social communication. I love talking about Social Spark, and it was really nice to kind of have a back and forth, and I'm so happy to get to do that again here today with you.
What did you learn, when doing that episode?
Yeah, so I think I really, Sharon, who is the host of that podcast, really wanted to know kind of what is one glimmer of hope that we can kind of hold on to in this busy world, this tech-based world where kids, teens, adolescents aren't necessarily getting a lot of practice with social communication. She's like, what's, one glimmer that we can kind of have as a takeaway? And what I said to her is there's so many little moments that we can build connection into in our daily lives. So I think that for me, the thing that I learned the most about is really how do we impart that concept of building connection with others to the outside world. And it doesn't have to be anything grandiose. It can be something really quick, initiating a quick game with your kids after school, which can then foster conversation, or, telling them about a cool billboard that you saw on the way home from work that might sort of tweak their interest. And so I think, really talking about ways that we can find little moments to connect to then build those relationships and those conversations is probably the piece that was resonated the most with me during that conversation.
Mm-hmm. I was also on one of her episodes.
Nice. Very, very nice.
Um, to get back to our original conversation, what have you learned in doing this kind of work?
A lot. I've learned a lot. So I think one of the biggest things that I've learned in sort of keeping with, a neuro-affirming care approach is that we really need to make sure that the clients themselves are wanting to work on this area in order to get success, gain momentum, and kind of move forward with goals. If a client isn't, noticing or that they have some needs around the conversation skills, they don't want to work on it. It's we really reach an impasse, and it doesn't carry the same kind of weight. So I think the biggest thing for me is really tuning into the challenges that my clients are sharing with me, and really confirming, is this an area that you want to work on? Is this something that you'd like to become easier? And if so, we can do that. But you need to be kind of bought into the process. So I think that that's the biggest kind of lesson that I've learned over the years.
Mm-hmm. And is there anything on your bucket list that you'd like to learn in terms of something new? Like, I'd like to learn this a little bit more, or I'm curious about this a bit.
Yeah, I think so. So, I mean, the current tool that I created really encapsulates conversation skills, but there's so much before the conversation skills that I often am working on with my clients or thinking about in terms of readiness. So, one of the pieces that I've sort of been percolating on is how can I develop something that will be sort of the lead up or the precursor to the conversation picture cards deck, and how can we really support clients with those sort of pre-ready skills before we launch into the conversation skills? Because I think if we have a lot of those pre-foundational knowledge, that those skills really, really carry over nicely to the bigger conversation skills. So that's the piece that I'm really thinking about. How can we kind of help clients develop those precursor skills, and what can I do to contribute to that?
Mm-hmm. Looking back, what sorts of was there any sort of like mentor or anyone that you've looked up to that said, I want to be like I want to be an SLP one day, or I want to learn what he or she is doing.
Good question. I think there's so many amazing SLPs in the field who have developed tools and things of their own out of a need that they've identified in their practice. I don't know if there's any one specific kind of person, but I think just seeing in general how SLP created tools tend to be the most effective in SLP related sessions. Is really what motivated me, is that, I was noticing this gap in my own practice, seeing that other SLPs have created things to fill gaps in the areas that they focus on, and that, hey, if they could do it, I think that makes a whole lot of sense and I should do it too. So just sort of the general sort of SLPs create amazing, wonderful, valuable clinical tools is sort of what inspired me.
And lastly, for those who want to do what you're doing, what tips, advice would you give to those who want to do that? I don't know what your experience was like leading up to it, like in graduate school and all that stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, so I would say, volunteer, work with other SLPs, get involved in clinical practices, and really, see the profession in all that it is. We work with so many different populations. So I, exclusively work in pediatrics, but there's also a huge world working with adults and geriatrics. And so before kind of going into the profession, I would encourage, everybody to kind of have some experience and exposure, really kind of see what the profession looks like in different clinical settings with different populations, and really sort of confirm that it is, what they want to do. As much as the profession is fantastic and so exciting in so many ways, it can also be really exhausting,
hmm
and tiring and rewarding for sure, but thankless at times. So really making sure that you're going into it knowing kind of what you're getting into, for all the good and for all maybe the tiring aspects as well, and really making sure you've kind of done that due diligence ahead of time.
Okay. Alrighty.